Hello, everyone, and good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning for something slightly different than we've been doing. So, here at the monastery, we'll be beginning a retreat. For us, it's a week-long retreat on recognizing impermanence, but we wanted to continue the live streams. So, we'll have 6 live streams during the morning and evening. Today, Thursday, and Friday, where Bhante Suddhaso will be leading us in a few talks, Dharma talks, as well as some meditation on the topic of recognizing impermanence. So good morning so far to Edward and Michael, as well as Chi 2003 YY. And welcome to everybody else who is watching but not typing. So this morning, Bhante Suddhaso will be sharing some words of Dhamma with us. And if you have any questions on anything that he shares, feel free to type them in the live chat, and he will address them at the end of his talk. So I will pass things over to Bhante Suddhaso.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Good morning, friends. So, as mentioned, today is the first of a series of 6 talks on impermanence. Particularly on the practice of recognizing impermanence, on seeing and feeling impermanence. And the truth is that we're seeing and feeling impermanence all the time. We just don't normally recognize it as such. We don't normally identify it. Briefly speaking, we're so caught up in the delusion of permanence, the delusion that there are stable, persistent objects, and a stable, persistent being is seeing stable, persistent objects. We're so caught up in this delusion of stable, persistent objects that we fail to recognize the fact that what we're constantly seeing and feeling is the opposite. What we're constantly experiencing is impermanence. What we're experiencing is constant change. What we're experiencing is the continuous arising and ceasing of distinct phenomena, which do not have any persistent nature, do not have any stability, do not have any substance to them. They don't have any abiding reality to them. So it's a bit like connect the dots. I recall when I was a child, there were these drawing books with a bunch of dots on a page, and you were supposed to connect the dots to make a picture. But there's actually no picture, there's just a bunch of dots. And we presume a picture onto those dots. We project a picture onto those dots. But actually it's just a bunch of dots. Of course, this isn't a perfect analogy because in Connect the Dots books, it's usually really bloody obvious what the picture is supposed to be. The dots are arranged in a way that makes it really obvious what the picture is supposed to be, usually. Whereas in actual reality, our moment-by-moment experience is not so obvious. It's just this splatter of sensation. But then we connect the dots to make this illusion of persistent ongoing objects. And that's based upon the illusion of a persisting ongoing observer of objects. So the practice of recognizing impermanence is about coming in tune with reality as it is. It's about dropping the false picture of reality that we project and coming into contact with the actual reality that we're already experiencing, but not recognizing. So sometimes we talk about doing the perception of impermanence as though it's an activity, but that's actually not quite correct. The perception of impermanence is actually a relinquishing. It's a relinquishing of our false concepts of permanence. It's a relinquishing of our projections of permanence. It's a relinquishing of the activity of supposing distinct objects. It's a relinquishing of the activity of believing in distinct, separate, persistent objects. So developing the recognition of impermanence is not an activity, it's the opposite. It's a cessation of activity. It's not a perception in the sense of something that we're trying to perceive or trying to do, but rather it's about recognizing the false perception that we have and dropping it. So it's the feeling of the perception of impermanence, when it's done correctly, is one of relaxing, of letting go of the distorted view of the world. Because what we start to realize is that it actually takes a certain amount of ongoing energy and effort to project this false image of reality. It takes a certain amount of ongoing effort to project this false image of persistent ongoing objects interacting with each other and perceived by a persistent ongoing observer. That all takes actually quite a lot of work. So we just stop doing that and relax into the experience of impermanence, the experience of there not being any persistent ongoing objects, and there not being any persistent ongoing observer of objects. So it's a bit like free fall. There's nowhere to stand. There's nothing to hold on to. And that's okay. In fact, it's magnificent. It's liberating. It's freeing. What's the difference between falling and flying? Well, if falling, you're going to hit something at some point. I suppose that's the big difference. But what if there was nothing to hit? What if there was no surface to impact against at the end of the fall? Then it's no different than flying. It's just that sense of unobstructed freedom, of boundlessness, a lack of limitation, which is what we're aiming at in Buddhism. So the end goal of Buddhism is called liberation. In Pali, it's vimutti, liberation, complete unobstructed freedom. And the Buddha defines this unobstructed freedom of mind in many ways. One of the evocative words he uses is he says it's like having a mind like a wild deer. Well, what does he mean by that? Well, if you watch a wild deer going through the forest, they don't see paths, they don't see trails. They just go wherever they want. Like, they don't seem obstructed by pretty much anything. They just go where they will. To a deer, there's no real sense of boundaries when they're going through the forest. So to us, we're like, oh, I can't go there. The underbrush is too thick. Oh, I can't go that way. There's too much grass. I can't go that way. There's too many branches. Well, a deer will just weave right through. They just make their own path as they go, because in their mind, there is no obstruction. It's just a forest. The forest is their home. So this is the mind of an awakened being. It sees no obstructions. It has no obstructions. It's always at home. There's no problems to be found. There's no boundaries in the mind of an awakened being. And that's another description the Buddha gives of an awakened mind. Vimaryadikatena cetasa, so a mind which has no boundaries, an unbounded mind. So the cultivation of the recognition of impermanence helps us to move in that direction. It helps us to learn how to let go of our distorted perception of solidity, our distorted perception of stability, and to get in touch with the underlying reality. The underlying reality of impermanence, of constant change, of instability, of insolidity, of insubstantiality. And that can sound kind of scary until we do it. And then we realize that the experience is not the least bit scary. It's not the least bit terrifying. The idea can be terrifying. But the actual experience it's like floating peacefully in warm water. There's absolutely nothing wrong. Nothing wrong at all. So the practice of the recognition of impermanence, which in Pali is called anicca sanya. So anicca means impermanent. So the prefix a means not or un. And nicca means fixed, solid, certain, stable, predictable. So anicca means not certain, not solid, not stable, not predictable. And sanya comes from two parts. So the prefix sang, which means complete or together, and the root nya, which means to know. So sanya is a complete knowing, or a piecing together of knowledge, piecing together of information to make a knowing. So sanya, then, it's commonly translated as perception, but its meaning is a bit closer to recognition or identification, or even conceptualization. It's forming a concept of something. It's forming a concept of what we're experiencing. So anicca sanya then is recognizing that our experience is uncertain, unstable, insubstantial, impermanent, constantly changing, never the same moment to moment, always changing. And that applies to absolutely everything that we experience. It applies to sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought. It applies to eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. It applies to everything physical and everything mental. So every single thing within the entire domain of experience is impermanent, unstable, insubstantial, constantly changing. And there are no exceptions to this whatsoever. No exceptions at all. So this is one of the ways that the Buddha describes for attaining full enlightenment, is to practice anicca sanya. In fact, the Buddha speaks about it over and over and over and over again throughout the suttas in various ways. He's constantly coming back to this as being the way through which one abandons all defilements of mind, the way through which one breaks through all delusions, the way by means of which one can abandon every obstacle to one's practice, the means by which one can attain the highest compassion and the most incisive wisdom. It's through this one practice of anicca sanya, the recognition of impermanence, the recognition of the uncertain, unstable, insubstantial nature of all phenomena, of all experience, of all sensation, of everything physical and mental, without any exceptions whatsoever. And it naturally culminates in the recognition of the impersonal nature of all things. So anicca sanya naturally culminates in anatta sanya, the recognition of the impersonal nature of all things, the recognition that nothing whatsoever is me or mine. Nothing whatsoever is our self. That there ultimately is no me to be found. There is nothing which we can point to and say, that is me. That is my true nature. That's my true self. Nothing can be found of that sort. And this is the key to full enlightenment. This is the key to awakening. But even long before the experience of awakening, the cultivation of anicca sanya, the recognition of impermanence, brings a great deal of peacefulness to the mind. So once again, the reality is impermanence. The reality is that everything is constantly changing. So when we believe reality to be other than that, when we believe reality to be composed of stable, reliable, predictable things, then we are out of harmony with reality. And that's very uncomfortable. So we're constantly experiencing this jarring disconnect with reality. So for example, if you've always had healthy teeth your entire life, and then one day you wake up and your gums are throbbing and swollen and there's so much pain and you're like, oh, what is this? This is horrible. Something is terribly wrong with the world. My teeth are permanently healthy and they have always been permanently healthy and they will always be permanently healthy. What is wrong with reality? Oh, nothing's wrong with reality. Teeth are impermanent like everything else. Health is impermanent like everything else. That's not the problem. The problem is that we expected it to be permanent. So that expectation of permanence from that which is impermanent creates discord in the mind, creates disharmony in the mind, creates dissonance in the mind. And that's dukkha. Disharmony with reality is dukkha. But when we recognize that everything is impermanent, then reality no longer has any way to surprise us, no longer has any way to disturb us. No matter what it throws at us, we're just like, oh yeah, impermanence. Yep. Yep, that's how it goes. Why would we expect anything else? So you wake up one morning and you're paralyzed all down the right side of your body. Impermanence. How it goes sometimes, I suppose. And you wake up the next day and your body's fine again. Oh, impermanence. That's cool. So it's recognizing that this is the nature of reality. And when we recognize the impermanent nature of reality, then we are always in accord with reality. We are always in harmony with the way things are. One of the really remarkable Buddhist teachers who I've met, she's since passed away a few years back. She was a Zen teacher who actually was paralyzed from the waist down. And it's interesting the way she talks about it. Well, the way she would talk about it. Again, she's passed away. She would speak about it with the most utter calm. She's just like, yeah, I could walk. And then one day I couldn't walk anymore. And it's just like, oh, okay. There was a recognition that that also was impermanent. So that change, that catastrophic change in the nature of the body, had no ability to disturb her mind because she had already cultivated the recognition of impermanence. So something which would drive any ordinary person to tears, to hysteria, to despair. She was just like, oh, that's interesting. I can't walk today. And she couldn't walk for the rest of her life. It's like, well, okay. So it really impressed me. I wasn't impressed by most of her teachings, but I was impressed by that demonstration of the imperturbability of mind, the unshakability of mind that comes through recognizing impermanence, that comes through harmonizing one's perceptions with the way reality actually is. So, of course, impermanence isn't always unpleasant or catastrophic. Impermanence is a perfectly balanced thing. Things are constantly changing, which means sometimes they're changing in ways we like and sometimes in ways that we don't like. Well, if we drop the liking, then there's just change. And change is just the way things are, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's no problem there. There's nothing wrong at all. And in fact, our likes and our dislikes are constantly changing. One day you like green smoothie, the next day you dislike green smoothie, and the next day you like it again. Because that might have to do with what ingredients they put in the smoothie, but that's another story. So cultivating the recognition of impermanence is it's like putting on armor that shields you from dukkha. But the reality is that dukkha never had a place to land in the first place. It was our perception of permanence that gave dukkha a place to land. It was our belief that things would remain any particular way, our belief that there were things in the first place that had the capacity to remain any particular way. That was what gave dukkha a place to land. And recognizing that there are no substantial objects, there are no persistent objects, there are no stable objects, makes us immune to dukkha. Dukkha has nowhere to land if we don't give it an object to land on. So over the next few days, we'll be practicing the recognition of impermanence. We'll be discussing the recognition of impermanence, and we'll be getting some sense as to what it's like to let go of the false image we project on the world. Getting some sense as to what it's like to relinquish our distorted opinions about the world. And to open up to whatever reality actually is, without any presupposition, without any prejudgment, without any liking or disliking, because reality does not care the slightest bit whether you like it or not. The universe isn't sitting there pondering, oh, I really hope Suddhaso likes me. The universe doesn't care what you like or what you dislike. The universe just is what it is. Reality just is what it is. So we need to be willing to let go of our liking and disliking, to abandon pleasure and pain, and come face to face with what actually is. And what actually is already encompasses every manner of pleasure and pain, every manner of liking and disliking. So we don't lose anything. This is one of the deep ironies of Buddhist practice. In order to attain awakening, you have to be willing to let go of everything. But you don't actually lose anything. Reality doesn't change. It's been here all along. It's been the same all along. You can't possibly lose reality because it's always been here. So you don't lose anything. But we must be willing to let go of everything. Now, what is the everything that we let go of? It's our perceptions. It's our ideas. It's our concepts. It's our distorted misconceptions of reality. That's what we're letting go of. That's what we think everything is. But that's just our distorted, mistaken ideas of reality. So we're not letting go of anything valuable. We're just letting go of delusion. But we let go of all of our delusion. And then our ability to perceive reality as it is becomes clarified, becomes clear. So this is a very brief introduction to the practice of anicca sanya, the recognition of impermanence. So over the next few days, I'll go into some more specifics on ways that we can develop this, particular methods and practices we can do. I'll probably also plunge a bit more into the theory and concept behind this because it's one of my favorite topics. And also it's Buddhism. You really can't get around this. The Buddha said that all phenomena are marked by three characteristics: dukkha, anicca, anatta. So we talk a lot about dukkha, and we talk a lot about anicca. And inevitably, we talk a lot about anatta as well, though perhaps not as much as we should. Always seems to scare people or confuse people or both. Sometimes it entices people, but usually it's either fear or confusion. But one of the lovely things about focusing on anicca is that when you focus on anicca, you naturally come to understand dukkha and anatta. Because these three things are not separate, they're conjoined. It's kind of like the Trinity, Buddhism. So it's these three things which are separate and yet inseparable. So over the next few days, we'll be exploring anicca, because anicca is the whole of the Buddhist path. It's the entirety of the Buddhist path. But that statement's going to require a bit more explanation, so stay tuned. So I think we're going to stop at that point. If you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and enter them in, and I'll answer as best I can. Thank you.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Bhante. And we do have a couple of comments and questions already. So Jesus Christ asks, does recognizing impermanence remove the doubt of meditation and non-self?
Yeah. Yep. Doubt falls away. Next question.
And welcome to some new people joining in as well. B and Jas and Stacy, good morning. And then Michael has a question, well, a comment and then a question. So he says, "Oh, okay," is a great response to everything. One could use it as a meditation so it comes up more easily when we face some adversity. I'll try it. And then his question is, if we must continue the responsibilities and activities of these days, how can we best participate in the retreat?
Yeah, well, that's a question to ask yourself. So I don't know what sort of activities that you have, what daily responsibilities you have. So you'll need to look at your own schedule and see how you can structure it to make it more like a retreat. See how you can structure it to do more formal meditation practice, to join in the live talks, and set some guidelines for yourself, like avoiding unnecessary conversation, avoiding anything distracting. Try following the 8 precepts if it's possible for you, or at least a few of the 8 precepts. Yeah, so do your best. It's difficult. It's difficult to practice intensively when you're living in a busy household life, but do your best you can.
And that's the last question and comment so far for this morning. So if there's anything else, feel free to type it in soon, or we might have an early morning. Michael does say, "Thank you, Bhante. I'll do those things and do my activities with more mindfulness." And then Jesus Christ also asks, is music considered a sensual pleasure or a combo of material and immaterial becoming?
It would usually fit under sensual pleasure. Material becoming. Too fancy. Don't make it to be more than it is. Yeah, it's attachment to sensual experience, that's all.
Okay. And then Ishan says, "Thank you, Bhante." And so I think that's all for this morning. So again, tonight at 7:30 p.m., you can all join in. We'll do some chanting, meditation, and have another talk by Bhante Suddhaso. And then tomorrow, as well as Friday, we'll be continuing the retreat with the topic, Recognizing Impermanence. And you can find all of the links to the talks on YouTube Live. So thanks for joining in, and we will see you all later today. All right, we can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, thanks everyone, and have a great day.